It's June 19th, 2013, and we are here interviewing Jesus Guillen, who is the winemaker at White Rose Vineyard. And thank you.
You're welcome.
Why don't we just start at the very beginning? Why don't you talk about sort of originally where you're from and how you came to Oregon in the first place?
Okay. Well, I am from Chihuahua, Mexico, and I came here because my dad basically was the one who first came to the U.S. just because he didn't have a job there and was kind of running out of money. So a friend of his who works for Temperance Hill Vineyard invited my dad to come to Oregon. So he came and he loved Oregon and decided to stay here and work. As for myself, I actually graduated as a computer systems engineer in Mexico, and I came to visit my dad. That was back in December of 2001, and I fell in love with Oregon. So I was gonna stay here, for just a little bit to visit my dad for probably 2 weeks or 3 weeks. But at that point, I decided to stay for a little longer time and actually improve my English skills. So I decided to stay here for 3 months, just for a term, at school for learning English, and then I was kind of just at the end of that period, I was kind of deciding if I was going to stay here or return to Mexico, and I basically stayed because I loved Oregon, and the more I explored vineyards here and I got to taste a lot of the wines here, I fell in love with them and decided to stay here for that.
So how old were you when you came up after you graduated? How old were you when you were first here?
21.
21. Okay. And was your father at that time already working for White Rose, or was he working for other vineyards?
He was already working for White Rose,
Okay.
and the thing is that my dad was working for Tory Moore when they were farming this vineyard, White Rose, and then the owner, Greg Sanders, she's the current owner of White Rose, he purchased the vineyard in the year 2000, and my dad and himself, since my dad was working here already, he was kind of spraying and everything, and they got to meet each other, and Greg basically offered him to work for him after the contract was due for Tory Moore, and so that's how my dad actually ended up working here.
So it sounds like they've been here. They've been partners for quite some time here. I mean, your dad's been working for him for quite a while. Yeah.
Since the year 2000, yeah.
Okay. And is he the vineyard manager?
He is the vineyard manager.
Okay.
Yep.
And then how many full-time people are there now working at the vineyard?
In the vineyard is basically just my dad and 2 other people.
Okay.
Working full-time in the vineyard.
Okay. So how did you start? So you get here, you decide to stay. What were you doing here at the vineyard? Were you working here at the vineyard as well? Did you start working here?
I was basically studying just English, just going like a couple times or 3 times a week just for classes to Chemeketa Community College. And then basically when my term was due, I was kind of asking myself if I was going to stay here or return to Mexico. So I went kind of like a tasting trip, to basically think about this. And in that tasting trip, actually, I tasted 2 of the best wines I've tried ever with the experience I had at that time. And those 2 wines basically made me realize that I was going to stay here and pursue a winemaking career.
So you've told me this before, but what were those 2 wines?
Oh, the Archery Summit Arcus Estate, 1999, and Elizabeth's Reserve from Alzheim, 1999. Those 2 wines, I believe those are kind of my 2 epiphany wines that made me stay here.
Because I've heard that from several winemakers that they'll have epiphany wines that it just sort of hits them that this is it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of like a transcendent experience that make you kind of go back and think about all the things from your childhood and everything, and be able to taste those experiences is actually great.
So what did you do then? So you have your epiphany wines, and so
So that
so
moment,
I'll,
yeah, so that moment I actually decided to stay here. The first thing was basically to keep improving my English, so I continued to attend classes at Chemeketa, and I actually applied for a job for Patricia Green, working as a vineyard worker. So I started to work in the vineyard, and basically it was like April 2002. So I started to work for her as a vineyard worker while attending classes at Chemeketa. Once my English improved a little bit, and I keep moving through the levels of the ESL program, they suggested I actually grab more classes like college writing classes and all those things. So I started to do that, and at that point, I realized, well, at that point actually, Chemeketa was kind of starting the enology program or the viticulture program. Um, so basically, I attended like 2 classes for a viticulture course there, and I kind of realized, that they were kind of learning slower, because it's actually a 2-year program. Um, so for myself, I decided to basically grab all the books they were using, kind of like the list of books they were using in the whole classes, and I started to buy those books myself. So the money I was earning from my job as a vineyard worker, I kind of was buying all these books, and then kind of starting to sell it myself. And that's the way I learned a little bit about winemaking. Um, the good thing about the Oregon wine industry is that actually winemakers or very experienced winemakers are willing to share all their experiences. And as for myself, I was working as a vineyard worker, so I was part of the industry. And as a part of the industry, everyone is very willing to share everything within the industry, because they're trying to make Oregon a better place, or vineyards are improving, or vineyards are older, and they're trying kind of like as a community to make better wines, just to showcase Oregon in general. Um, so I got to learn from, some of the best winemakers in the area, just by asking. Go there in the winery and ask questions, and they share a lot. So
so who would you say were some of the ones that you shared more with you that you learned from?
well, Dave Page from Alzheimer was one of the guys. Gary Andrews, rest in peace. From he actually started the winery Archery Summit. Um, those two were the guys that shared the most. Then here and there, I was asking questions, and actually a lot of winemakers were able to answer my questions. But those two guys, every question I threw at them, they actually answered a lot of things and in more depth than any people here probably.
Could you give me an example of maybe something that when when you say that, give me an example of something that maybe you had questions about that you had conversations about.
Well, how to remove reduction in a wine, how to deal with organisms in the wine, all those kind of very fundamental things in winemaking that normally people would talk about it kind of superficially, but they were able to tell me in very high detail, as what they add, how much they add, at what time they add it, um, and the results of it, the experiences from them, like every result they get and how to deal with it. I mean, in that much detail actually they went into. And at that time I was not a very kind of, I didn't have very deep knowledge of winemaking, but I was able to understand a little bit better those sections that even in books, you don't find those kind of things.
How do you feel you had a degree, how did that sort of degree in sort of the computer science area, did that help you in terms of your ability to sort of systematize or to work through how to make wine?
I think the mindset they give you as an engineer, to be able to look for answers and to systematize everything and kind of make it like a system, really helps a lot to understand and to better apply all the principles to winemaking. And to look for the fact that I actually look for all the books, to learn myself, was one of the things I learned in computer engineering. Just be able to expand on the basic teachings that they give you at school, kind of be able to expand on books and also from people that are on the field.
How do you, so at this point, you're learning English, you take the books, you're working in the fields. How do you then start making that transition? I mean, you're trying to learn, but obviously you need to be given,
Oh, absolutely,
you
yes.
know, what's that next step for you?
So I was learning everything I could, and one time, you know, the owner from White Rose is actually from California, so he was rarely here in Oregon at that stage. So one time, actually, I was helping my dad doing something, and I met the owner, and well, he kind of saw my interest in wine and how eager I was to learn and everything. So he offered me a job as a vineyard worker, kind of to help my dad in the vineyard. So that was one thing, and the owner, you know, his goal was to actually have his own winery. So at that point, he didn't have this place here, so he was building this place, and I worked in the vineyard. And then at one point, you know, he was a winemaker, and he was actually making the wine with the help of a consultant, Mark Lossack from St. Innocent. He was making the wine, and I was actually in the vineyard. And he offered me actually to work in the winery as well a little bit. So I was kind of half-time working in the vineyard, half-time working in the winery after probably 1 year as a vineyard worker. And then as production kind of increased in the winery, he offered me to work as his assistant, basically, in making the wine full-time in the winery. So those kind of opportunities he presented to me, and I grabbed them, basically. So meaning more responsibility, you know, more things to worry about, but he had confidence in me, and I had confidence in myself too, so I was able to take him. And by the year 2008, after probably working like four years as his assistant, he gave me the responsibility to be a head winemaker here.
Okay. How do you feel that you're having some of that experience of working in the vineyards also helped you as a winemaker?
I think so. Yeah, it helps to really understand what's going on in the vineyard and how to prepare for different things. You know, weather related. Even though sometimes you can't really do a lot, you can do little things that actually help improve everything there. And you really understand how the vineyard works in that regard.
Okay. Okay. So you told me the story, and it's actually this block over here. So tell me about the first chance you were kind of given to really make your own wine.
My own wine.
Yeah.
That happened in the year 2006, vintage 2006. Vista Hills. Well, Greg and myself, we were making wine from Vista Hills Vineyard. Well, he was making the wine from Vista Hills Vineyard. In the year 2006, actually, it was kind of like a dry summer, and voles were kind of biting into the vines and kind of damaging all the trunks outside. So a lot of the vines were dying, and there were as many as 1,300 vines that were dying because of that. When the harvest time came, Greg went to try those vines, and he didn't like the fruit of it because it wasn't probably ripe enough, or it didn't meet the standards for making high quality Pinot Noir from them. So he said basically to remove all the vines and replant new ones. So that's when I saw the opportunity, you know, to ask for that fruit. So I told him that if he wasn't going to use that fruit, if I could use it myself to be able to experiment kind of firsthand myself how to make wine. So he said yes. My dad, my wife, my brother, and myself harvested the fruit. It was like 1 ton. So we make like 3 barrels of wine, and with some modifications chemically, you know, because the fruit wasn't in perfect balance. It was very acidic. The sugar was lower. So some things have to be done to be able to balance that fruit. and the resulting wine was really good. And the owner tried it. He actually loved it. He couldn't believe wine was made from that fruit. And the owner from Vista Hills Vineyard came and tried it, and he was like, "Oh my God, it's really good too." Um, so from that point, he kind of gave me the opportunity to partner with him and make a little bit of wine on the side. So that was my first year as I actually experienced winemaking firsthand in 2006.
So then you took over as winemaker here. Now I notice you've also, like, your dad still works here,
Still works.
right? You have a brother that also works here,
Yes.
right? So how much family do you have involved? And did you meet your wife up here, or?
I met my wife here
Okay.
while I was working for Greg as kind of half-time vineyard, half-time winery. So my wife was actually pouring wine in the tasting room of Wine Country Farm, just the house right there. And I went one time and I met her there. Then I asked her out and well, everything. And then, and the rest is history.
Well,
Yes.
and now, and this vineyard that's over your shoulder is actually named the Guillen Block, isn't it?
Guillen Vineyard, yes.
Yeah.
The owner actually, as a tribute to my family, because my dad was the one who started with him. I started to build the winemaking things with him, and my brother actually came along too. So we all worked for him. We kind of all helped to build this business basically. So he decided to name that block after us, which was actually a huge honor and a very cool thing from him.
So how do you feel about, one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you also is because everyone talks about the role of, the Latino workers, in the fields, and you're kind of one of these success stories in terms of also a winemaker. How do you view the role, sort of historically? We always talk about those first 6 guys you see, Erath and others, and then you see, and people talk about the role of Latinos in terms of that support. What do you see as kind of the major contributions of Latinos generally to winemaking in Oregon? How do you, from your perspective, how do you see that?
Well, at this point, actually, I see the Latino workforce actually being able to grow the grapes. They work really hard in the fields. And if you ask any winemaker, they will tell you that winemaking actually starts in the vineyard. So I would think probably them tending the vines very well kind of gives us the opportunity to work with better fruit and make better wines. So they're basically the base of the good fruit Oregon is growing right now. And I think in the future, a lot of Latino people will be kind of more involved into direct winemaking rather than just vineyard growing. But the foundation for a good wine is the fruit itself, and if they do a good job at it, we'll have very good fruit and we'll actually yield very good results in the wine. So they provide really good fruit for us.
How do you look at right now? We were talking with Luis down at Soco Blaso, and he's talking about some of the healthcare issues, and with Salud that's been a big help for them. What are some of the major issues that you see in terms of do the workers here at White Rose have pretty reasonable healthcare? Does Salud, are they?
That's the thing about probably working in the vineyard, that wineries probably don't have a lot of budget to really kind of incorporate more like healthcare for vineyard workers. So Salud was a huge idea, and I think that's helping a lot of people here.
So do they actually come here? Does Salud come here, or how does that work in terms of the?
Yeah, they come to different wineries, mostly bigger wineries. They come and set up the stations, to look for basic things like blood pressure and sugar levels and all those things. And they provide actually help, to be able to go to different clinics and get very good discounts for basic kind of healthcare. So you don't have really the insurance, but you have very good discounts, and you can actually access to those clinics they have, and the basic care that they provide in each vineyard.
You and I have had the chance to talk a little bit about how you approach winemaking itself. Um, One of the things that we've talked about is whole cluster you use. I finally been able to remember the term lignified. um, can you describe sort of the style and how it is that you approach making wine? Because it sounds like, when we've been talking a lot with different wineries and wine growers. It sounds like your style is pretty unique in your approach and what you're able to do. If you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, well, over the years, since I just started actually helping Greg make wine, we were trying to figure out a better style for us. So there was a lot of experimentation going on in the early years. So we normally, conventional way to make wine is actually just use the berry, which is basically the skin and the seed and all the pulp inside, and kind of destem it or remove the stem from the cluster. For us, that wine that we produced from that kind of style was too fruity, and well, it's not really something that is wrong in the wine. It's just that it wasn't really our style. So we were trying to experiment with different yeasts and oak, increase the oak percentage of the new oak percentage in the wine, trying to make the wine less sweet or less sappy, less fruit forward. And then we stumbled upon the idea of using cold cluster. So with the stem, we were able to remove the fruitiness of the wine and make the wine kind of more balanced, because fruit actually can be out of balance sometimes too. So with the stem, we were able to achieve that, and then we improved upon the idea of the cold cluster fermentation, basically by targeting the tannins from the different sources. So you have the three tannins from the grapes, which is basically the stem tannin or the skin tannin or the seed tannin. The skin and stem tannin are astringent and very pleasant when they're ripe and good, but the seed tannin tend to be a little more bitterness and very strong astringency. So with the techniques we're using, we're targeting only getting extraction from the stems and the skins. So basically, when the fruit comes in, the stem has to be lignified. That's one of the things I talked about. Lignified means that the stem is actually kind of dry and brown, and it's not like the green tannin you're gonna get. If you actually taste lignified stem, it tastes spicy, which is really cool. And if you taste like a green stem that is not lignified, it's actually very kind of leafy and grassy. So to receive the fruit from different vineyards, the stem, and the big percentage has to be lignified. So we see it here kind of added to the tanks. So in the tanks, a lot of people use what is called the punch down. So with the punch down, basically when the wine is fermenting or the must is fermenting, everything rises to the top. So you have to push all the cap down to be able to extract more from all the three things I mentioned. But ourselves, we use a pump over. With the pump over, we target more the tannins that we get from the stems, but actually the outside of the stem. So if you don't break the stem, you don't get the inside of the stem. The inside of the stem tends to be very green. The outside is kind of better source for stem tannin, and we also get the skin tannin while limiting the extraction from the seed. So targeting tannins for us was a huge deal, and we learned to deal with it. And I think our style has built upon that to be able to represent what the true typicity of Pinot Noir is, and be able to remove the fruitiness of the wine that way. It really fit the style we were looking for really well.
So the pump over, so would a punch down break the stem more? Is that why? Okay.
It will break more the seeds, more the skin. Well, the skins or the berries. It will break the berries and get the seeds out, and also will break the stems, and you'll get more extraction from the inside the stem. So be able to be more gentle that way. It helps really to limit those sources of tannins.
Okay. So do you have where do you see yourself going now? You actually got your own label also that you kind of do on the side.
Yes, it's a very small label that, the 2006 wine I made
Uh-huh.
was providing me with that opportunity because the owner of Vista Hills actually offered a partnership,
Uh-huh.
and basically they provide the fruit, and I actually make the wine, and they provide the fruit for exchange or a little bit of the wine I made. So that's one thing. And so since basically 2007, I've been kind of making my little wine on the side. And my ultimate goal, my huge dream is to have my own winery in the future. So I'm working towards that.
Uh-huh. What are the next steps towards that?
Well, I'd be able to actually increase my production from my own wine label and expand on the knowledge I learned from White Rose and producing high quality wine from White Rose as well. So at one point, if I keep increasing production, I'd be able to probably go on my own.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us about your experience that you think people would like to know?
Yeah, well, my experience is basically that if you have a dream, doors seem to open up and opportunities knock if you know what you want. And if you don't let those opportunities slip, actually you kind of achieve big things. Because when I decided to stay here and pursue a winemaking career, for me it was like a huge goal, almost impossible to reach. Um, and starting on the field as a vineyard worker, earning the minimum, which was like $6.50 an hour, and working like 10, 12 hours, sunny days, cold days, however it was. Um, I always kept the dream in my mind alive, and never gave up, and that's why I'm here right now. And now I have a new goal, which is almost very big for me too. But I feel that I will accomplish that too, because if you work at it hard enough, you'll get things done.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any?
I just wanted to ask you, well, two things really. First of all, why do you think you were afforded so many opportunities? I think a lot of people look at agricultural workers as just workers, and was there something unique about the relationship between the winemakers and their workers that created these kinds of opportunities? And then kind of attached to that, what was your own feeling about kind of moving up in the ladder, going from a vineyard worker to producing your first set of wines, and so still a little bit more on that, yeah.
Yeah, well, actually, let me think this through.
Yeah, I mean, that's okay.
um,
So I guess let me put it another way. What makes you different from? There are a lot of people who they make a good enough living, but we all know working in the vineyard is really hard work. Like we were talking with Luis down below, and he's like, we've had Anglos that have tried this, right? So it's brutal work oftentimes. So on the one hand, it's good work in some ways, but a lot of people stay with that work. What was different for you in terms of maybe your own motivation, but also in terms of the opportunities presented to you?
well, I think my eagerness or my willingness to actually look for or look to learn about this, and the passion it drew from me from when I just kind of started working here, uh, is what people saw in me. I don't know, they probably saw a little spark that this guy is trying to do something, and we're willing to share a lot. And even for the owner, this guy that is an engineer, um, he knows his stuff, and he is willing to learn about this. Probably he gave me the opportunity because of that. And when he gave me the opportunity, and I was able to to realize all his ideals. Um, Probably I gave him kind of the eagerness to give him more responsibility as well, to be able to see how much this guy can grow. Probably, I don't know, but I think it's just because I had a very clear goal of what I wanted, and worked really hard at it. People signed me that, and were able to provide me with opportunities for that.
It sounds like, I mean, in fact, we were just at I've had students at Northwest Wine Company for the past couple of days. That also seems to be a hallmark generally of the Oregon wine industry, right? Where one of the guys we were just talking about who runs the lab at Northwest Wine Company is like 23, right? And he said he started bottling, and then one day they sat him behind a computer and he did some good things, and they were like, well, do you want to do more of that? And within like 2 years, he's running their lab, right? And it sounds to me that it's not just, it's maybe that's one of the strengths of the Oregon wine industry is regardless of kind of and we have, I mean, there are challenges for women and there are challenges for Latinos, but it's also there is this openness there of looking for people who are willing to kind of be the ones to kind of pick up and do something and try something that then that will give you more responsibility, because it seems like there's always more to do.
Yes, and I think for me, the thing I realized first to be able to accomplish my dream was to learn the language. So for a lot of people, it's very difficult to learn the language, or they're not putting enough effort into it. And for me, that was a huge thing. I mean, for me, it was a huge thing to actually learn the language and be able to read it from books and everything. So that's why I actually was very into learning first the English, the language and everything before the winemaking thing.
Right.
So I invested like 9 months of my time trying to learn English. I moved through the ESL program and enrolled in college courses for writing and all that to learn English. So I think, we're here. I mean, the language is English, so we need to learn English. I think if you actually know Spanish, you have a huge advantage in the Oregon wine industry. But to be able to speak to the American consumer, you have to really speak English, learn English. So that's one of the huge things here for me, that I decided to learn English first before winemaking.
That reminds me of, you also, when we were doing the barrel tasting the other day, you also make wine don't you make some wine still for Vista Hills?
Vista Hills,
right.
yeah.
So is it just them and White Rose and then your own label, or how much wine? Who are you making who all are you making wine for right now?
Just Vista Hills, my own label, and White Rose.
Okay.
For Vista Hills, I make wine just because of the partnership that I started. So from the fruit they give me, they get a percentage of the wine, but they can actually apply the label to that and sell it in their own facility.
How much wine do you make totally? So how much do you make at White Rose and for Vista and on your label?
For Vista, I make probably like 100 cases, and as White Rose winemaker, we made an additional 100 cases for them. For White Rose, we make about 3,400, and for my own label, it's probably about 80 cases.
Okay.
Are there any other Jesuses like you? Or are you kind of a exception to the rule?
Well, I'm myself.
You yourself?
Yeah. I don't know if there are others out there, and I don't even know if there
are there other people that have, other Latinos that have seen your story and have sought out your advice, or do vineyard workers talk to you about what you do and show interest in what you do, or is it really just your own initiative and the desire, learning English and kind of your own, that propelled you? Or do you see a possibility maybe in the future of other people like you?
I see the possibility of people of any kind, being Latino or whatever, if they're willing to learn something. I was with the right mindset that the United States is actually the land of opportunities, and it proven itself, because of the opportunities actually that gave me. But I think I haven't had any people actually asking me about how I did this. And for me, that's how you start. If you want to achieve something, you have to ask the guys who already achieved it.
That's right.
And if nobody has asked me that, then probably some guys don't want to achieve something like me. They want different things. So I don't know. I think it's just a matter of asking the right people. You know, like if you want to learn about marketing, you ask the guy who is selling a lot, or if you want to learn about whole cluster winemaking, you ask the right guys like myself. I asked, we actually hired Gary Andrews as a consultant, and I kind of learned to taste the wines from Christum, which they make a lot of whole cluster wine as well, or Bergstrom. Those three wineries actually make extremely exceptional whole cluster wines, and that's why I learned. Just taste their wines, ask what they did, and I mean, it's incredible when you ask, when you want to learn something and ask the right people, they are willing to
Were you
give you
surprised
the
by
answers.
that at all?
Absolutely, I was really surprised of how in extreme detail they're willing to share.
Yeah.
Which was a very cool thing for me because I was learning a lot. And even now, when I have a problem, I call guys here, and they're willing to even come and help.
And that's another feature of the Oregon wine industry, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, we were talking with Anne Sarie, who works at Northwest Wine Company. She's from France, and she just said, you know, the idea of people in France, in Burgundy, calling each other to help, or doing like a Steamboat Springs thing where you show up with your problem wines, right, and helping each other get better, just is not a concept that you see in France, and to a great degree even in California.
I've heard that. I haven't really experienced working in other industry,
Yeah.
but I love this industry a lot
Yeah.
because of that.
Yeah.
And even for us, you know, there are probably tastings, everywhere, and you take your bottle and we all share different things, and it could be only winemakers there, or it could be people from different fields of the same industry, and they're all willing to share every insight. And even though we're competition, I think everyone as a group is just working to promote Oregon as one of the best regions to produce Pinot Noir, and I think that is showing how people is willing to share everything to raise up the standards for Oregon quality, Oregon Pinot Noir quality.
Good. Good. Okay. We're good. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Well, you're welcome.
All right.